Chapter 10, I Wish, Inquest 936. Question. What does a nylon rope or belt, towel, swing rope, extension cord, quarter-inch steel cable, quarter-inch plastic-coated steel cable, clothesline, bed sheet, exercise machine cable, glittering red, white, and blue metallic fringe pennant streamer, telephone cord, parachute cord, USB computer cable, pair of pants, shoestring, and terry cloth robe belt all have in common? Summer camp is the closest thing to an adventure many kids will ever have. It's a time for them to venture away from home and share excitement and mystery with other kids. It's living outside their familiar room, house, or bed. While at summer camp, many find out where and how they will fit into society. Some will be leaders, some followers, and some will be wallflowers or onlookers. Lakeview Methodist Camp was my annual summer pilgrimage, grades 6 through 11. Except that one summer at the Baptist camp. The difference between the Methodist and the Baptist are told in a million jokes. Both summer camps were good, but the Methodist camp had one thing the Baptist camp did not: girls. With two older sisters, I knew about girls and even had a girlfriend or two or three. But summer camp awakened the knowledge of the difference between the two sexes. For 2 summers, my camp love was Marley Thomas. She was a 7th and 8th grader's dream, a blonde beauty who gave new dimension to swimming pool time. 36, 24, 36, divide by 2. We walked around the lake, we practiced electrified hand-holding, and then that most meaningful kiss. I had played doctor and even explored a little with the opposite sex, but this was different. Just being with Marley felt good. We wrote love letters during our times apart. We picked our star in the sky, knowing that although we were separated by distance, we were joined together as we gazed upon that star. Every night, if I was not watching TV or doing something else, our very souls would be tied together by that solitary star, our star. But the distance from my house to her house may as well have been measured in light years. Letters became fewer and fewer. Young love's light flickered and then went out, to be replaced by another. Inquest 936. Never swim alone. The 12-year-old boy can hear it in his head, but the swimming hole is sitting there empty as the sun rises in the cloudy eastern sky. Johnny stands outside the camp cabins on a hill. There's not another soul in sight. Everyone else is getting ready for breakfast. He can see across Lake Tyler, or at least the jagged finger of the lake before him. Jet skis, party barges, and water skiers all have plenty of room. At this hour, only a few bass fishermen are on the water. The campground swimming area is a very small part of the lake. There's no sand beach leading to the water, and a large gray wooden pier goes out into the lake, providing a place for sunning and swimming. Much of the shoreline is green grass and ancient giant oaks. Most of the bank is steep, with a 5-foot drop-off to the water. In one tall tree, a rope is tied to a limb 30 feet up. The inch-thick rough hemp rope dangles over the water, with a large knot at the bottom. The boy watches the knot sway back and forth in the breeze, like a watch on a chain, hypnotizing. He's seen the other kids take the leap. They swing out over the water and drop. Some will hold their arms tightly by their sides, pointing their toes down to pierce the water smoothly and leave only a ripple. Others will finesse themselves into a headfirst dive, while others flip and flop and fling arms and legs. All will plunge into the wet coolness below. Some will jump high enough to catch the knot between their legs. Crossing their legs and locking their feet into place, They'll sit and swing until those waiting yell, "Come on, it's our turn, it's our turn." Twice he had stood in line, waiting to make the jump. Twice he stood on the bank, looking across the water and measuring the distance to the rope. Twice the other kids called him chicken as he turned away. As I approached age 30, I pumped gas during the summer and went to college the rest of the year. While I worked at the service station one day, a sleek red Mercedes pulled up to the pumps. I walked up to the darkly tinted window. Note to young readers. Not too long ago, most gas stations provided an attendant who would put gas in the car, check the oil, wash the windshield, and even check your tires, all at no extra charge. The transition to pump it yourself or self-service has cost many high school jobs and not reduced the gas price one bit. The window tint made the glass a mirror. I could see my reflection as I looked at the driver's side window. A long curly beard and wavy brown hair down to my shoulders looked back. Hair that had been cut off during my Army years had been allowed to grow with a vengeance. I was a hippie, dressed in a greasy Texaco uniform. You can trust your car to the man who wears the star and who carries Herman in his pocket. Herman was my albino pet mouse. One time he poked his little head out of my beard and caused the lady to drive off without getting her gas. My sister's cat put an end to Herman's life. He lived with me only for 2 weeks. Politically, he will live with me the rest of my life. Every election, someone will say, "He had rats in his hair." My answer? Now I have neither rats nor hair. My image disappeared as the window motored down and a young lady came into view. At least she looked younger than I was. "Can I help you?" I said. "Do you have unleaded?" she asked. Note to younger readers. Have you ever wondered why we do not have just gas instead of unleaded or a lead-free gas? The world once put lead into gas to make cars run better. There was gas that did not have lead in it. It was called drip gas. It was cheap, but it made your motor clatter and clang, and sometimes the motor would keep running after you turned it off. It was good for cook stoves and heaters. Environmentalists probably looked at gas station attendees and felt they were breathing too much lead. Gas companies learned that by not adding lead, they could charge more for a gallon of gas. Auto companies learned they could build a whole new fleet of unleaded or lead-free cars. There was also petrol we called ethyl, but that's another story. Yes, ma'am, we have regular unleaded and super unleaded. The super unleaded has an additive, probably gold. People, like cars, come in different makes and models. Some catch your eye and cause you to look twice, evaluate what you're seeing. This sophisticated blonde definitely required a second look, and she also took a second look at me. "Fill it up with super," she said. I found the gas cap under the license plate, removed it, stuck in the nozzle, and wondered, what would I see if I given the opportunity to wash her windshield? The door opened, and a pair of black spiked patent leather high heels, connected to a pair of shapely legs, reached for the asphalt pavement. The legs seemed to go on forever as they oozed from the car. The woman soon stood before me, sun at her back, creating a bright halo around her. My eyes squinted at the vision of a shapely 5'8" dream that could have come from one of the Playboy magazines I would get and quickly hide on my teenage birthdays. The little black miniskirt worked its way down to cover the tops of her thighs. I was filling her up, the car, that is, with gas. The spiked heels clicked on the pavement as she walked towards me. She looked out of place in Winona on this hot summer day. The Mercedes made that slight teet-teet noise as it cooled and the gas flowed. 20 years later, another Mercedes would take out the gas pump in a ball of fire. "Do you know a Shamburger who lives here in Winona?" she asked. I instantly recognized that voice and the deep blue eyes. It was Marley from camp. I began to melt. It was hot, and now would be a good time to go swimming. I could drive off and swim forever in those deep blue eyes. "Yes," I said, "I am a Shamburger." "Really?" she asked. "His name is Mitch. Do you have a son about my age?" I smiled. No," I said, slowly thinking. "A son about my age?" If she was kidding, I was not laughing, and if she was serious, I had aged or slipped into some other world of which she had no knowledge. Was I beyond the recognition of my youth? "But I do know Mitch," I continued. "He's been traveling all over the world and just got out of the military. He's doing fine, going to college. He's been married about 8 years now and has a daughter named Marley." All this was true, except the part about the daughter. I had a son named Noah Mitchell. She placed the tip of her index finger on her lips painted deep red, and her thumb rested under her chin in the thinking position. "Really," she said, stretching the real and putting in too many L's in the word. She turned and went back to the coolness of her car. The door closed and the window slid up to hold the cool air in. I wondered if I had put one over on her, or had she put one over on me. The transaction necessitated her signing the credit card receipt, and I stood by, waiting. She lowered the window and looked up with a wondering sort of smile. Her eyes said the jig was up. She signed and handed back the receipt. "Tell him an old camp friend stopped by to say hello, should you ever see him. My name is Marley. I have a son named Mitch." The transaction was completed. We both moved on. I went back inside the station and walked into the dingy restroom. I looked into the faded mirror hanging over the porcelain sink, stained with rust from its water. I saw a 26-year-old hippie. Then Herman climbed out of my pocket and onto my shoulder. He turned around and sat down. His beady red eyes looked into the mirror, too. Harry Chapin sings a song about a taxi driver picking up an old girlfriend. I knew how he felt. Johnny looks at the empty pier, knowing it will later be full of kids, laughing and swimming and playing. Some will take turns leaping off the bank and catching the thick rope in their hands. But swimming comes later, and for a 12-year-old, it's like an eternal 3 hours away. Here and now, this morning, there is no line. I could swing for as long as I want, Jimmy thinks. There's even the possibility of swinging and dropping back on the earth without even getting wet. No one would even know about it. When I was in my school age, but preteen years, some of my best times were spent in the woods. Alone, I would venture into the Winona wilderness with Mom's butcher knife and slay dragons and save princesses or explore the deep, dark jungle. If a friend or two or three would join in, we would fight Germans and or the imaginary invaders of our territory. Sometimes I would return home wet and muddy. Once I returned without Mom's knife. There's something about trees, vines, creeks, mud, water, and woods that draw kids and adults into them. Maybe we have a primal instinct to get back to Mother Nature. Large vines hung from the treetops. We cut the vines for 2 reasons. The first was to allow us to swing like Tarzan, screaming the blood-curdling, animal-summoning Tarzan yell. Cutting the vine meant killing the vine. The good vine would last for a week or more before it came loose from the branches above to drop you into the water and the muck below. The second reason for cutting the vines was that someone told us you could smoke a grapevine. Every tree in my yard had a treehouse in it at one time or another, and each was equipped with a rope for climbing and swinging. Johnny walks down to the swimming area and looks around. A few people are stirring, but no one pays any attention to him. The rope looks farther out than he remembered. Yesterday, kids were jumping out on the rope, some smaller than he. He thought it'd be easier to swing with no one around, but in truth, challenging activities often seem harder when you're alone. The goal is to catch the rope as high as possible, straddle it, and then slide down to the knot saddle. The plan is to get a running start, then leap at the very edge of the bank, jump high, reach high, and grab hold. Life is a risk-taking adventure, to some more than others. As we grow older, we become more aware of the consequences of the risk we are taking. On the edge of a cliff in the Rocky Mountains, I remember how my heart throbbed when my 10-year-old daughter, Lena, wearing flip-flops, hopped 3 feet out to stand on a rock. The surface area where she landed was only a square foot. The space around her was a sheer drop and certain death. Her fond memory of this event were matched by the ones that were frightening to me, even though I could not count the many times I faced the real possibility of my own death. Could we, or should we, avoid the experiences of life that may cause pain, physically and emotionally? We take risks all the time. Risk-taking, for no other reason than to have the experience, is a uniquely human concept. We may want to raise our children in cocoons, protected until we turn them loose to fly away. But children do not learn to walk without falling down. The value of a friend is not realized until a friend in need is a friend indeed. Love without pain is cheap. One cannot experience standing on the top of the world without the battle and the risk of climbing to the mountaintop. Johnny runs as fast as he can. He jumps as high as he can. He reaches as far as he can. His hands grasp the rope, and he feels the rope glide perfectly between his outstretched legs. He grips hard, but not strong enough to hold himself up. He begins to slide down the rope. His rear end begins to pucker. He crosses his legs. The knot takes hold as it meets his rear, and he sits on it. He's locked onto the rope. The wind stirs his hair as he quietly glides through the air. He leans back confidently, pulling the rope with his hands to make the pendulum swing higher and higher. Back and forth he flies, feeling the brief moments of weightlessness, reaching pinnacle after pinnacle. Higher and higher he goes. In all the days of camp, he has seen no one reach the heights that he now enjoys. He's kicking and pulling back when the ringing of the breakfast bell invades his adventure. Maybe I won't get in trouble if I can get to the mess hall in time, he says aloud. No one can hear him, but maybe by saying and hearing it, he can make it true. He stops rocking and pulling to let the swing slow. He looks down while he's over the water and sees fish. He knew of the nibble screams kids, especially girls, made as they made contact with fish. Now, looking into the undisturbed waters of the swimming hole, he realizes that he had no idea there were so many fish there, or how big they are. This vision moves below him in slow motion. Then he sees the green grass below. He's back over the land. He spreads his legs and lets go of the rope. He tries to adjust his body to land feet first, but his effort only causes him to look like a wiggle worm flying through the air, blindly trying to get somewhere. Kerplunk! He hits the ground, nearly feet first, but at an angle, and it leaves him flat on his back. He lies there for a few seconds that feel like several minutes. I'm okay, he thinks. Then he springs to his feet and begins running to the mess hall. He slows to a walk as he approaches his cabin mates and slips into the chow line.
Where have you been?
It's the low voice of the adult counselor. Nowhere, he says, trying to control his heavy breathing. Well, let's don't go nowhere again. The counselor smiles, puts his hand on Johnny's shoulder. Johnny feels the strong grip of the calloused hands that next week might be hammering nails or driving a tractor. Johnny feels a little older, like they are both men. This has got to be the best day of my life, the 12-year-old boy thinks. Returning from overseas and leaving the military, I found myself again at Lakeview Summer Camp. The Reverend Bert Bagley persuaded Fay and me into assisting as counselors for 7th grade camp. The older Methodist preacher, Big John, was serving his last year as camp director. He was grooming Brother Bert into position. After that year, we were hooked. For several years, Fay and I made the pilgrimage. In later years, Fay stayed home to raise our own kids, while I continued for 1 week each summer, playing guitar and working with the kids at camp. It's amazing how much one can learn when immersed in a pool of 7th grade boys and girls. Politics and obligations, mandatory schooling, and other activities eventually took the place of Lakeview summer camps. I will always treasure those moments as a camper and as a counselor. I can still see the white cross planted on an island out in the lake, the foggy morning mist on the glassy waters surrounding it. The Reverend Bert Bagley is now the senior pastor at Moody Memorial United Methodist Church in Galveston. How I wish. The parables Jesus told were true stories, Mom said during a heated discussion about the Sunday sermon. The preacher's wrong to say they're just illustrations and may not have actually happened. Mom, the preacher said there's truth in the parables, but he did not say the parables were true stories. There's a difference. Jesus would be a liar if the stories were not true. She adamantly continued. Then Dad, he did not even go to church that day, spoke up. Time has no relevance to Jesus. He sees the past, present, and future. He told of a seed falling on fertile soil and a woman searching for a lost coin. The actual events he spoke of in the parables may have happened in the past or in the future, or they may be happening right now. Like the parables of Jesus, I'm sure that somewhere during some time this story is true. A full life is made of such experiences. I hope kids and counselors will return to the real world from camps, trips, and adventures with wonderful memories of times spent together and with renewed hopes for the future and things to come. I hope somewhere in the world every night at least 2 people are gazing at the same star. I wish all stories had a happy ending. Johnny runs as fast as he can. He jumps as high as he can. He reaches as far as he can. He grasps the rope high enough to allow plenty of slack, but the knot flings outward like a whip, flipping around. He twists his body trying to wriggle free, and the rope responds by making a loop that slips over his head, the knot dangling down his back. It takes both hands to hold on to as he swings back and forth. He does not know what to do. His arms ache. He feels the rope slip through his fingers. He lets go of the rope, hoping to soon feel the water or the earth beneath him. He falls 3 feet before the rope snaps tight around his neck. And so, what do a nylon rope, a belt, towel, extension cord, 1/4-inch steel cable, 1/4-inch plastic coated steel cable, clothesline, bed sheet, exercise machine cable, glittering red, white, and blue metallic fringe pennant streamer, telephone cord, parachute cord, USB computer cable, pair of pants, shoestring, and a terry cloth robe belt, and a swing rope over the water at Lake Tyler, all have in common. I've seen every one of them hold up a lifeless body. End of chapter 10. Some people think that first chapter about the kid getting his head cut off on the motorcycle wreck was the hardest chapter to read. To me, this was one of the hardest chapters to read and to write. When I wrote this chapter, I'd actually written it after I'd written a bunch of the other ones, and I thought, gee, I wish this story had a happy ending, because it has the elements of my growing up and all the fun and dangerous things I've done, and I wouldn't trade them for the world. I'm glad I'm still alive, and if I died tomorrow, well, it's been a good ride. So I wish this story had a happy ending, so I got the title I Wish, and I told the ending that I would like for it to have. And I'm sure that in some campgrounds these experiences happen and kids walk away happy. and sometimes they don't. This next chapter was, well, I thought was finished till I talked to my son, and we started talking about H2O, water, and where it goes and how long it lasts, and, well, you'll enjoy the next chapter.